Oh, we'll get some music going. We are live now, actually, but I haven't got the music going yet. Got a ringing noise, got a podcast noise. Here we go. We're live, and we're... Oh, look at that, Rob. We actually are live on 8 different platforms at the moment.
Fantastic.
And just wait for them all to connect. I can hear them connecting. So we're now live on Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, Twitch, X, which I can't get used to saying. I think it's more like Twitter, Instagram, Kick, and let's get ready to rumble, as they say, rumble. And I do that because we just want to get this message out to people. So I've labeled this Antique Dealer Confessions because I remember some of the best interviews I've heard as I was growing up was the confessions of a window cleaner, confessions of a carpet cleaner. And then I thought, I'm going to interview Rob, going to ask him some questions. And I thought, what should I call it? I thought, let's make it a bit jovial and let's have confessions of an antique dealer, because, and I'm going to ask one of my questions before we even introduce you properly, Rob, is first, how do you distinguish the difference between junk and an antique?
One man's antique is another man's junk, and one man's junk is another man's antique. It's or persons, I should say. It's completely subjective. There's a lot of things that I sell sometimes for a lot of money that I would never want to own and keep myself. And yeah, it's in the eye of the beholder.
Oh, the beholder. I'll put us in 2 little pretty wee screens. So we're now in framed. This is also open to the public. So if you're wondering what Rob and Danny are doing in here, normally we're busting crypto opportunities that have gone wrong. So we get a lot of our followers are actually wondering why we're talking about antiques. But Rob introduced me the other day, and he was interviewing me about business networking, because I used to own a business networking company. So I'm returning the favor. Here it is, mate. This is as good as it's going to get. Your moment to be interviewed by Danny de Hek, aka the Crypto Ponzi Scheme Avenger, is actually here to interview Rob. I love the music. Love the music. Now, I do actually have a description in this video, which I asked ChatGPT to write for me. And it said, in this special episode, we are thrilled to interview Rob Woolley, an antique dealer based in New Zealand. We won't narrow it down to where you live. Rob has been selling antiques, and you corrected me. I said about 20 years, but you say 22 years.
22 years.
Wow. Must love that job. And is known for being a good talker with a great sense of humor.
Thank you.
All right. And I'm saying, despite our real jobs, Bob and I share... Sorry, Bob. Is your name Rob or Bob? Bob. Rob. Share a common interest. We spend a lot of our time fighting crypto Ponzi schemes and scams, and we thought it would be a fun interview, to interview each other. I hate reading this shit. And to give you a better understanding of what we actually do for a real job. And we do this because I spend about 70 or 80 hours a week doing my YouTube channel, and I know you're not far behind me, Rob. And if you're not talking antiques, you're talking about what went down in a Zoom meeting with a whole lot of people that are trying to take mum and dad's investment money from them. Would that be a fair statement?
Yeah, I'm just trying to provide value each day and get good practice being a YouTuber, get better at speaking as well, because I stutter, comes on, comes off, kind of come back on about 2 weeks ago. So this is me on a bad day. Well, it's not actually, because I'm in my comfort zone. But yeah, so, every video that I put out, I'm going to learn something, and hopefully other people will too.
Well, interesting enough, if I didn't know you, I'd never know you stuttered. So you've actually overcome, well, you managed stuttering by a technique that you use when public speaking. But I know when we talk off air, you'll seem to be more out of zone, or what do you call it? What do you call it?
Yeah, you're kind of going to open up a whole can of worms there, Danny, because I can tell you now what you think it is and what it is completely different. When I talk to you off air, and sometimes I stutter and push through blocks and stuff, that's actually Rob. That is actually Rob. That's not Rob being relaxed. That's Rob under a little bit of pressure trying to get his words out because Rob stutters. But Rob, the YouTuber, he's pretty fluent. So it's almost like a different persona, a different personality. And one of the interesting things is that there's a device called a delayed auditory feedback thing that they invented decades ago for people who stutter. It kind of wears off. But speaking through a microphone and having headphones on, although it's not really delayed, it's a very similar technique, I think, working on the brain. So when I can hear my voice, I can kind of play my voice like a musical instrument.
How about that? That's why sometimes when you're talking to me, when we're not YouTubing, I hang up on you and ring you back 3 minutes later because I think, he needs about 3 minutes to get his words out. But it works well for me.
If that is true, I'm going to come around and shoot you.
Yeah, sounds good. And that's why being a dyslexic person, you can articulate yourself fantastically with words. You were writing a big long email today while you was talking off air, and I was asking you to send me a copy of it because I would like to get ChatGPT to rewrite it so I can resend it to the same people and make a complaint. But technically speaking, words are my biggest fear and words are your biggest fear. So we have a common interest.
Yeah, well, the spoken word can be quite fearful, actually, but written word, no problem at all. I think that, anything impromptu, public speaking wise is fine. But yeah, when Rob stutters, and you're not really supposed to say that when you're working on your speech, but it is true. And so, like we want to be honest, Rob stutters, but other versions of Rob don't stutter.
I have a burning desire to be an author, and I've never, ever, people don't believe me, read a book in my life. Now, technically, I have read a book. And when I say I haven't read a book, I could read a whole page of a book and then 2 minutes later go back and read the same page again and then go, oh, I think I've read this. Because I'm actually just reading the words, but I don't understand or comprehend what they're actually saying.
Yeah,
So it's kind of a funny one. Yeah. All right, I've got questions, and I have got these written out, but if I do forget them, I might have to repeat them. So we've got quite a few questions, but I did ask ChatGPT for a little bit of assistance. I did write out 5 of the questions myself, and the one that I already have asked is, which I will remove, is how do you, what is the difference between antiques and junk? I think you answered that nicely already. One man's treasure is another man's blah, blah, blah. So let's get rid of it. Okay, how did you first get interested in antiques?
I'd say interested in antiques is a bit too strong. To be perfectly honest, I'm not. Well, I call myself an antique dealer because to actually say what I really am is too long. But I specialize in English China, and anybody who specializes in China is going to buy and sell other antiques as they become available. But basically, started because another guy that I knew that I went to school with and randomly ran into was an antique dealer, had a shop in town, and I had just come back from the UK at that time, and so I hung out with him. He invited me around to his shop and said, do you want to come out one day and go around the garage sales? And that's what we did.
Okay, what was the most unusual, most unique or unusual item that you've ever sold? Well, you still got it in the garage somewhere. Sorry, just chucking an extra bit of verb on that one.
Well, I'm definitely a dealer and not a collector. So I don't collect anything. I don't collect China, don't collect anything at all. I'm not passionate enough. I've got pretty close to collecting Matchbox toys.
Wow.
Yeah, close. I've got a white Mustang here, which I quite like. It's mint, but not in box, and it's not really worth anything, probably only about $10. But I quite like it, so I haven't sold it. It's about the only thing. There's a few other things, but there's one thing that comes to mind, which is an interesting story. I used to have a shop in town. There was a guy next to me who had a shop as well, and we kind of had this unspoken rule, or at least he did, that if he was buying any stock, don't come near him. Just leave him to interact with the person who's selling to him.
Yep.
But I pulled up one morning. It was quite early, about 9 o'clock. He was just opening. I was about to open up shop, and there was a lady wanting to sell a guitar. And she asked him, do you know anything about old guitars? And he says, yes, it's a mighty old guitar, and I really like it, and I'll pay you $50 for it. And she said, that's not what I asked you. I said, do you know anything about old guitars? And of course he said no, but no one does. And it was starting to get a bit heated. So I went over there to kind of calm the fires.
Yep.
And I said, hey, look, if you want to find out anything about your guitar, if you leave it in my shop for about 4 hours and just walk around town, do your shopping or whatever it is that you wanted to do, and come back and I'll see what I can find out. So I found out a little bit. I made her an offer of $500 for it because I thought it could have been worth about $1,000. And she turned me down, which was 10 times higher than she'd been offered a few hours before. And she said that she would hunt around the other dealers. And I said, well, I don't think any of the other dealers are going to offer you anywhere near what I've offered you, because no one knows anything about it. I just happened to fluke one guy who did on my phone calls. At any rate, cut a long story short, that turned out to be a Gennaro Fabbricatore 1829 guitar by the second most famous maker of old guitars in the world, and would have been worth tens of thousands of dollars had it been original. But as it turns out, it was semi-original, and it had heaps of repairs over the years. And we sold it for just under $9,000. Went half each on it.
Right. And did she actually finish up saying, okay, sell it to me, and for 500? Or how did that? Because you said
It's kind of a fascinating story. She said, well, if it's only worth $500, I'll take it home, hang it on the wall. And believe it or not, I have heard a lot of people who have actually said exactly that phrase. So there must be a lot of people with strange things hanging on their walls. And I said, well, it's not going to give you any money hanging on a wall. So we ended up with this convoluted deal where I would try to sell it. I had 7 days to sell it for as much as I could. Like obviously a lot of trust involved, because at the end of the day, the lady doesn't know how much I've sold it for. But yeah, I was going to, she was going to get the first 900 and we go half each on everything after that. And I sold it to a luthier, which is a guitar maker in New York.
There's a guy in Littleton actually who is a luthier, and they were a person that repairs. I didn't know what it was. I was out hiking with him, and I asked him what he did for work, and he said he's a luthier.
And he said
and
that.
I went, okay.
And I would have been exactly the same. Had I not sold an item to that person, I would never have known what that word meant to this day.
Yeah. What do you have a favorite antique that you? Oh, that does not make sense. Do you have a favorite antique that you have ever come across? That's wrong. What's your favorite? Well, let's just rephrase that to Danny question. What's your favorite types of antiques that you walk into a place, you walk around I presume you go into, well, I'm going to ask that question. I don't know where you get your antiques from, but I presume when you walk in and you get a whole lot of, oh, look at that. What's your favorite thing to go for? What's that one item that if you had to run into that place and that was on fire and you were going to grab the most valuable thing, what one would you grab first?
Yeah, to be perfectly honest, it's all about the money, honey. If it's worth more, it looks better. That's one of my sayings. If it's worth more, it looks better. Tudor pewter is one thing that I kind of particularly like. I'm not too sure why. So there's actually some Tudor pewter in the back. Not too sure if people can see it, but right there, that is Tudor pewter. And that is Tudor pewter right next to it as well. Not great examples of what Tudor pewter is, but sometimes it can have enamel on it, which is like ground and melted glass, usually blue and greeny color. And it can look quite cool, and it polishes up like sterling silver. So it can polish up very bright. It can be worth a fair bit of money, particularly if it's a clock or something like that. It's arts and crafts, and I'm not too sure if I like the colors, the shapes, the design, the history of the money, but I don't like it enough to collect it, put it that way. The other thing that I quite like, which just happens to be in this photo as well, is not this so much. That there is what they call Wedgwood luster. There's Wedgwood Fairyland Luster, which is probably about the same age as that, but a bit more interesting because it's got fairies on it and nymphs and stuff like that. That can be about as expensive as English China gets
I've got
for
a great
20th
question.
century.
Are antiques global? Like, if you went to Ethiopia with your antiques, would Ethiopians look at your antiques and go, "Wow, that's really valuable because it's a Queen Anne," or is it mainly America, UK, and all those like? Could you go over to Germany, and would the antiques in New Zealand that you call valuable here be valuable there? Because that would be really interesting.
Yeah, that's a very good question. Short answer is each country or each location around the planet has their own styles that have become prevalent over the decades or centuries. So if you went to Africa, I'm not too sure that there's any widespread, well-known African antiques. Like, there'd be the cultural items, but in terms of porcelain or anything like that, or sterling silver, gold items, anything like that, I can't think of anything coming out. South Africa would have Krugerrands and coins, I guess, which would be quite old. Generally speaking, the most how can I put this? Each country seems to buy their own antiques. Never used to. New Zealand never used to. But that's why Crown Lynn, which is a New Zealand pottery that shut around about the 1990s, is now really popular. And I wouldn't say it's high quality, but it is collectible. You can collect expensive items or cheap items depending on your budget. Most expensive antiques in America are American antiques. Most expensive antiques in Russia are Russian. Most expensive antiques in China are Chinese antiques.
Honey, hold it, Rob. Helen's got a question. Yes, honey?
I have a question.
You asked me how long I'm going to be.
How long is that going to be?
She wants to know how long I'm going to be. She's
don't
sitting
know,
here in her
half an
sexy
hour or so.
PJs with a toothbrush going, "It's Wednesday night."
It's not.
Yes.
It's not Wednesday night. I don't know, honey. We've got a few questions to ask Rob about his antique business,
Okay.
and then we'll get back to it. And he was talking about Russian stuff, which I'm really interested in. Because the Russian antiques must be pretty amazing. I always think that they'd be funny, duddy sort of looking antiques because, I don't know, Russia doesn't seem to be. But then they use the gold, don't they? And they have lavish gold leafing and their
Yeah.
decor. That's what I'm getting at.
Most Russian antiques I wouldn't know, to be perfectly honest. But Carl Fabergé was the jeweler to the Tsar. So Tsar Nicholas, which is the one who got murdered. He was the last Tsar of Russia.
Now we're getting into it.
Yeah, Carl Fabergé was the jeweler, and Carl Fabergé made eggs. He's most famous for his Fabergé eggs.
Oh, that's the ones I'm thinking of. Those eggs. I've watched documentaries. I used to watch the Antique Roadshow, and my brother's father is actually Wayne Wright. Now you would know him, wouldn't you?
Oh, yep. Heard of, yep.
Yeah. I've been in his house, and his whole house was full of antiques and all this sort of stuff. My brother was had a mystery father, a knock on the door, "I'm your son," sort of moment, but it happened to be Wayne Wright. It was because my brother's wife was looking in the paper, and there was a guy that looked just like my brother, and his wife said, "Hey, Ricky, that looks a lot like you," and Ricky goes, "Oh yeah, it's got the same name as my real father," and since then, Ricky's travelled with him and all sorts of things, which is quite nice. My brother's 9 years older than me, and he's a half brother, obviously, but interesting story. But he finished up being an antique dealer. And if you ever go into an antique dealer's, actually, this is why I struggle when I go into your house, Rob. You're right, you don't collect antiques. But this guy had antiques
and
wall to ceiling.
Wayne Wright used to import antiques by the container load, I think from Europe, I think. I can remember walking into a shop once, and he had, from memory, a Belgian armoire which is like a big piece of furniture, which very loosely you'd think is like a huge wardrobe. 110,000 from memory had on it. I've never seen anything that expensive. So unless my brain is playing tricks with me, but it was telephone numbers.
Well, I heard that he'd spent some time in a little wee room once, but anyway, that's a different story. But I will tell you another story, because my landlord used to be a antique dealer when I had my first flat, and he used to have his shop on New Regent Street as well, the shop on the corner. So you would probably know him. I can't remember his name.
I would probably know of him. There was an older guy had a shop on the corner there. This would have been about 20 years ago.
Well, I would have been probably 23, so 29 years ago, mate. A hell of a nice guy. And I remember when he passed away, his son got the estate, and I thought, oh, he won't be as nice as the landlord I had. So I actually were literally packing up. I had no agreement, packing up everything, and I'm walking out the door, and this guy comes up to say, "Oh, look, hi, I'm the son of the blah blah blah, and we're going to put up the rent." And I said, "Oh, that's cool. Here's the key." And I literally, as I'm walking out, I handed him the key to say, "I'm moving out." So it was quite funny. Put the rent up to anything that you like. Okay, I am going to ask you, because we fight scams, and we're always trying to find story. There is a question that's coming up, and I want you to think about it in between questions. And what is a potential scam that you could run being an antique dealer? Because there's always, every industry has got their own.
That I could run.
Well, you could do. Say if you wanted to become a scammer with your knowledge of antiques, what would you, like? I mean, just offhand, I'm thinking that there must be a way of looking at a antique and a ripoff and knowing, because I know one thing that really gets me really weird when I'm looking at jewelry. On the inside of jewelry, they stamp it with things.
Yeah,
and the people,
all marked.
because I watched that. Is it Porn Star, the black and white? And they look at that stuff like it's the religion. They can read it. And I'm thinking, well, why doesn't the scammer just come up with his own stamp, and then,
it would be very hard to fake that. And the other thing is that, like, for example, usually the marks that are on the inside of a ring or something like that are usually like an assay office or there's another name, is a standard mark. I'm not too sure now. But what it is it basically says I am 9 carat, 14 carat, 18 carat gold, or whatever it is. But usually if you buy that, depending on the situation, if I were to walk into a house to buy something, I would have a look at the ring and I would be guided by that mark. Sometimes you can tell it's gold even if it's not marked, but sometimes you can think it's gold and it's not as well. But generally speaking, a pawn shop, particularly a pawn shop or a jeweler's or anything like that, if someone came in with anything, you would have a look at that mark, but you'd also test it as well. So if it wasn't what that mark says it is, then you would know pretty quick.
Right. All right. Think of a scam anyway, but I'm going to come back.
I can tell you a scam right now.
No, you got to wait.
Okay.
We want people to stay to the end.
I'll hold it in.
Yeah, no, it's cool. Can you? I want you to share a story. The question is, can you share? It wasn't really funny, but can you share a funny or memorable? That's more like it. Memorable story from your time as an antique dealer. And what I'd like you to tell me is the story about the lady that when you with your stutter and you rang up. She rang you up and you couldn't get your name out, and she hung up on you. If you don't mind.
Well, that's pretty much the story.
Yeah.
In 2007, and I know it was 2007. Oh, no, actually, it could have been 2006. 2006, 2007. A lady responded to my ads, and she had a collection of hand-painted raw Whistler, which is about the best china you can get. I got all excited because I thought, I got all excited. Or however I do get excited. I got all excited, and I thought, oh, this is, the call that you want. So
Yep.
I didn't really want to know all of the ins and outs because it would be a surprise. And I think I don't know that I'd got to getting her name and address and stuff. but I was getting to that. And when you stutter, you say what you think you can say rather than what you want to say. And sometimes you can't say anything at all, depending on what type of stutterer you are. Some people stutter, and some people block. I block.
Yep.
So, yeah, she said, who am I dealing with? I just couldn't get a word out. I just couldn't get anything out. And I'm trying to get Rob out. And while I'm trying, of course, the lady can't see what's happening at the other end of the line, my struggles. And she said, if you're not prepared to tell me your name, I'm not prepared to deal with you, and hung up. And she had an unknown private number. So I couldn't even ring her back and tell her what was going on. And that was probably one of the best things that ever happened, to be honest. I missed out on the hand-painted Royal Worcester china, but that was enough to tip me over the edge and get me to go and do something about my stutter.
Yeah, good stuff, mate. What's the most surprising thing you've learned about antiques over the years? That's a pretty hard question to come up, but I think you can handle it.
Wow. Okay. I'll answer this in an unusual way.
Not surprising.
Yeah, is that if you watch Antiques Roadshow, you think like you'll see a lot of really knowledgeable people. What you may or may not realize is that those people usually specialize in either jewelry or clocks, watches, glassware, whatever it is. But you assume that they're just generally really knowledgeable. And some of them probably are. But they have decided from probably a young age, and sometimes their fathers or mothers were antique dealers, to just get in, rip into the books and read everything. I've never read a book on antiques. I decided at some stage that I wanted to research what I was looking at. So if I walked into an auction rooms, I would take a photo with me, take heaps of pictures, come home, do the research, work out what is that item, or what are those 50 items or whatever that I'm interested in or want to know about. I would do the research on eBay or Trade Me, which is our local kind of online auction site.
eBay, yep.
And all I wanted to know, I would learn some information about the items generally, maybe some history, something about the designer of it or anything like that. But generally what I wanted to know is, how much is this worth? That was the key thing. And that's the difference between me and some other dealers, is that a lot of other dealers have a passion for antiques and they usually collect. I don't have a passion for antiques. It's about the money. And it doesn't mean that I don't like some things. It just means that I want to be a good dealer. So I want to be able to offer a fair price, but I also want to get in any situation I'm in where I have the opportunity to buy. I know I'm coming from a position of, I know what the market is. And I think knowing what the market is, how much the market's prepared to pay, is more interesting or valuable to me than knowing whether this was made in 1833 or 1902. I want to know, is this worth $80 or $800?
Yeah. Do you know the name of the guy that runs the black and white, Rick Harrison?
Ah, yep.
Yeah.
The one in Las Vegas.
Yeah, that's the black and white porn dealer. I watched a video actually, which I probably will post in the chat room in a second. But it was the inside life of the multi-millionaire Rick Harrison from Porn Stars. And I'll chuck that in the chat room for anyone that might want to grab and have a look at that. But don't do it now because I'll be deeply offended. But do you think he's is he like, I look at the way he sells stuff, and every single time he basically has the same approach. So somebody might come in and they'll say, okay, well, how much do you want for it? And he'll go, 10,000. He go, well, I don't know what it's worth. And he said, but I'll get an expert in. He'll get the expert in. They'll come in and they'll say, oh, it's only worth $4,000. And then he'll offer them $2,000. And then the person will go, oh, I can't sell it for $2,000. It means a lot more to me for that. And he goes, well, I'm a business here. And then he said, look, I'll give you a 2-2, and that's my final offer. and then they'll go, okay. And I watch him do this time and time again. He seems to have a formula around his technique. He always uses the same technique. I don't think, and often, or sometimes somebody might come in and say, here's a coin that I want $2,000 for. And I've seen this guy and he said, oh, this is much more valuable than $2,000. And a guy will come in and say, well, this is actually worth $50,000. And then he'll say, look, I'll give you $40,000 for it. And the guy will go, oh, I want 50. And he'll go, but if you come in here asking for 2, I'm now offering you 40. And you heard the guy said, I'll be lucky if I get 50 in an auction and I have auction fees to pay and all this sort of carry on. It must be quite frustrating. And I've got a question coming up here later on. But basically, when somebody thinks something's worth more than you do, how do you go about handling that situation? How do you walk away from something when you want it and the person's got a big value ticket in their dollar sign eyes who doesn't potentially know the difference between retail and wholesale?
Yeah. It's a tricky one. There's several aspects to that question. The first thing is that show's on TV. And because it's on TV, then part of the attraction is entertainment. So if it was just Rick Harrison or I'm struggling to think of his son's name, or Chumley, or anything. Yeah, like if it was just them, I don't think it would have the entertainment value. And so they probably call in those experts in part to get knowledge and in part because it's another character, it's another piece of color to the rainbow that makes up the show. So I think that's in part. The other thing is that he's buying like the whole gamut of antiques. So he could buy a piece of china, a coin, a stamp, an advertising poster, a movie reel, like anything at all. And one of the things about antiques is that people go, oh, you like antiques? Well, actually, antiques by definition is anything 100 years old. So right now it's anything made before 1924. But when I started, antiques definition was anything older than 50 years. So that would have been, so if you go back to, say, 2002 when I started, 2002, 2003, it would have been anything but before 1953. So I think the definition of antiques kind of changes. So that's one thing. But what it does do is that even if we went on anything over 100 years old as an antique, we're talking about everything ever made before 1924 as an antique. So we're talking like a cartwheel. We're talking about a hair clip. We're talking about a trinket box, a piece of crystal. We're talking about a towel, a blanket, a bed. So
it could even be a housemate, couldn't it, really?
It could be a house.
Antique house.
An antique house. Not too sure that too many people would use that phrase, but this is the thing where what people don't understand is that everybody specializes and they know what they know. So the way I used to explain this is if you think of a pizza and you have the pizza sliced up into slices, each dealer knows one slice absolutely inside out. And the slice either side, they have a fair idea of what that is 90% of the time, say. The rest of the slices, they've got a general idea. So, for example, I get offered furniture every now and again. Do I buy furniture? No, not at all. Do I go and have a look at furniture? Well, it depends, because I might go and have a look at a piece of furniture, not that I want to buy it, but I want to go there, take some images, pass it on to another dealer, and maybe get a cut if the other person buys it. So I profited from that call. I profited from having my marketing work. Coming back to porn stars and his negotiation technique, if you absolutely knew the value of something and someone said, I want $2,000, and you knew absolutely that was 50,000,
Mm-hmm.
that would be a tricky scenario to be in.
Mm.
There is a kind of a rule that we're supposed to pay fair price,
Mm-hmm.
but fair price is like how long is a piece of string. Fair price can vary so much because some items are worth, say, $500, but there may be only one person in the market who's going to pay $500, and you don't know that they're buying. How much is the next person prepared to pay? Could be 150. So is it a $500 item or a $150 item? So, and if you're going to offer half of what it's worth, that's the difference between offering $75 or $250. It's a huge variation. So when I'm buying, I think, how much do I think I can get, and how quick do I think I can get it?
Yeah. You held up a glass the other day and had a chip in it, and you went, "Oh, I never saw that." So I presume there's times when you buy something and you get it home and you realize that it's not sellable, and
Yeah,
all
there'd
of a
be
sudden you go, "I've
very
got all of
few
it."
good things that I buy that I miss.
Yeah, yeah,
Like if you're paying out a fair bit of money on the edge of your comfort zone, yeah, you're going to check it pretty damn good. My eyesight is not as good as it was 20 odd years ago. I'll tell you now, my eyesight used to be fantastic, but now iPhone, best thing. It's got a magnifier on here and it's got a light.
yeah.
And so, yeah, if I'm going over an item, I'll go over it very closely with a light. Sometimes daylight's really good, but being inside a house, trying to look for a hairline crack or anything like that, which can, just to give you perspective here, if you buy a piece of china and it's okay and it's worth $500 and you find it's got a hairline in, it's probably worth less than 100.
Right.
So, you
And
know,
I presume they can repair them sometimes, and it's very hard to see if they've been repaired, or can you spot that?
you can feel the repair. So yeah, it's kind of weird. If you specialize in China, yeah, there won't be many repairs that I miss because generally repairs are oversprayed, and they're oversprayed with a synthetic substance. And that's because if you repair one spot, then the gloss or the texture of that spot will be different to other spots. And to get rid of that, the whole item is oversprayed. And that oversprayed, if you take a piece of, I haven't got a piece of china here at the moment, but if you take a piece of china like, if you take a piece of china like that, then that shiny glaze on it, not the gold, but the rest of it, like right there, where it's got a reflection. So that glaze is glass, ground up hot glass that's been melted in a kiln. If you overspray that, that glaze will go from being cold to the touch to not cold to the touch.
Wow.
So, yeah, if that was repaired and I picked it up, I'd probably spot it the moment I picked it up before I started looking at it.
No. Hey, just to go back to Rick Harrison, just for a shits and Google question, how much do you think his net worth? What do you think he's worth?
I was watching a show. He is him, and there's some other English one. I can't think what that English one is now, but there's two shows, and Rick Harrison would be one of them, where you don't know whether those shows are 100% kosher or not, but it does look kosher. Like it looks more kosher than not, put it that way. And there's an English show that is. Whereas there's another one called
Craigslist Hunter.
I haven't seen that one,
Oh,
but
brilliant.
there's one that David Dickinson used to do called Real Deal or something like that, where they had people would come in, they'd have an item to sell, they would sit with a dealer, and it would go something along the lines of, would you take £100? And they'd say, no. Would you take 140? No. 180? No. and the person would end up paying, maybe 400. That doesn't work in the real world. If you offered them, like if the person wanted 400 and your first offer was 100 quid, you'd probably get thrown out the door. There's no negotiation after that.
What do you think he's worth, Rick Harrison?
Oh,
I was quite surprised when I heard it. I won't say anything, but I'm just curious what you would think.
I would say in the tens of millions. I only because of the things that he buys, but probably that show as well. Like you do wonder how much they've made out of that show. It's been an incredibly successful show. It's run for many seasons, and so sometimes it would be almost worth buying some of those items just so that it's on the show.
I think once the item's been on the show, it also helps sell it. There's probably people watching it going, "Oh, I wanted that." That's why I watched Craigslist Hunter, which is quite a good one, and that's based in America. It's much more laid back, and he's just, I think he's got about 120,000 subscribers, and he interacts with his audience, and I just quite like watching him. I quite like it. Yeah, that's why I reckon that you could be doing more of the antiques on your YouTube channel. You'd probably get more views, perhaps, because it's interesting. People always want to know how much something is worth, and if potentially who you sold it to, and maybe how much you. Because there was guys that used to go around barn hunting in America, and they'd find old cars, and they'd buy them for $5,000 and then fix them all up and sell them off for $40,000. I used to like watching those ones as well. Anyway, Rick Harrison, 12 to 15 million was his estimated net worth.
Okay.
Gets about $100,000 each show, so they see it in the video, whether it was put together by somebody like me, I don't know, with a real deal, who knows, but it was quite a good story. He's been married a few times. I quite enjoyed watching because I've watched the show. I think I've watched every single episode of his. The other one was, what about the Antique Roadshow? Because that one there used to be quite funny, because I used to listen to people coming in and they'd bring an old Nana's clock or whatever it called it was, and I would look at it and think, well, it's all very well saying it's worth £35,000, dear. You've got yourself a real gem here. Oh, and I'd go, oh yeah, but who's going to buy it for £35,000? And the reality of it, I often wonder if that was more authentic. And I'd be interested to know whether you think the Antique Roadshow was more authentic than maybe Rick Harrison's.
Well, the difference between what Rick Harrison is doing in any of those pawn shops is that the pawn shops are buying it. And Antiques Roadshow, they're valuing it and probably entertaining with a little bit of the history as well. And the other thing is that valuations are kind of weird. And I'll just use an item behind me. Okay, so, for example, if we were to take that teapot there, so that's Royal Albert Lady Hamilton, I think. Yep, it will be. If someone asked me what is the wholesale price for that, i.e., if you owned it, how much would you get? So, depending on who you sold it to, whether they actually knew what Royal Albert and knew what Lady Hamilton was, and had confidence in what the China market was, they might pay $50 to $80 for it. A good dealer who knew exactly what it was and could sell it pretty quick might pay $150, maybe $200. You'd be struggling to pay $200 for it now if you're a dealer. So that's what you might sell it for. If I had one of those right now, I think I'd get about $350 for it. But if that got broken and it was an insurance claim, then that's a kind of tricky one, because it's definitely going to be no less than $300 or $350. But if you have to come up with a value that you think, well, if there's another dealer out there that had a shop that had high overheads in an expensive city in this country, what do I think they could put on it? And so the person who is putting in an insurance claim should get paid out the amount that, no matter where they have to buy that from to replace their item, they have enough money. So yeah, I would reasonably expect to get $350 for it, and I think that would be a fair price online because you don't have your overheads, and like it's a little bit of buying on trust online. But if someone said, "Hey, that's $550 in Auckland," yep, perfectly fine. I'd be happy with that.
Cool. Where do you keep your antiques, if that's not a personal question?
In Aladdin's cave.
Yeah, it's a good answer, Rob. Do you have your jar of gold handy?
No, I don't. No, I don't. I
Yeah,
don't.
one
The
day, Rob.
majority of it's scrap.
Yeah, that's right. Anytime he gets scrap gold or silver, he puts it in a jar. And one day he held up and says, "You know what this is?" And I went, "No, I don't, Rob." But it was his pile of Aladdin's gold.
Yeah, it's not
Um,
all gold, but the majority of it is. Yep.
what type of person typically purchases antiques? Is there a demographic?
That's a really interesting one. When it comes to English China, yeah, definitely woman. And depending on what type it is, if it's, how can I put this? If it's, I don't think there's another way to say this. If it's girly China, it's probably right now and for the last few years, it's probably someone from South Korea, China, sometimes Japan, and Thailand that's probably going to buy it.
Mm.
Never used to be like that.
I work in a fitness shop and we sell Garmin watches, which I think I haven't got one on. Funny. The other day somebody walked in, two golfers, well-to-do couple. You could tell by their clothes, and I thought, oh, this would be easy sale. They'll buy a $1,300 watch each. And the lady, well, we started talking to the man. Eventually, the lady decided to be the one that looked like she was more interested in the man. And then we showed her the perfect watch, and her eyes lit up, and she went, "Oh, well, yeah, that's the watch I need." And we asked her how, and she played golf, and it was 2 or 3 times a week. And we thought, "Oh, yep, she can't live without this watch." And then they walked out of the shop and said they'll think about it, and they'll go out for a cup of tea. And we never saw them again, but they could come back and buy it. But when they walked in and we started talking to them, we both went into sales mode and thought, "Here we go. This will be an easy one." What about you with that? Do you find some people are just there to buy, some people are there to look? What do
Yeah,
they
you
come
can't.
from?
When it okay, you can split all antiques into 2 categories. There's collectibles and there's decorative. A collectible could be something like a pocket watch. You're going to buy a pocket watch, not that you want to use one. Some people might, but generally you're going to buy a pocket watch because you collect pocket watches. You're fascinated by them. You may collect one brand. You may collect anything that's gold, sterling, silver, certain periods, whatever it is. But you're going to buy it because you're a collector. If you were selling something like furniture, you're probably not going to buy it because you're a collector. You probably don't collect antique furniture as such. You're going to buy a piece of antique furniture because you've got a particular use for it. You've got a place in the house that you want it to put a certain purpose. And you're going to buy it because you like it. So a collector, you can't, it's very difficult, if not impossible, to sell a collectible. A collectible sells itself. The collector's either going to buy it or they're not.
Yeah.
Price may be the only determining factor. With a decorative item, yeah, if you talk it up, if you like the most simple thing to say if you wanted to sell any antique is to say, particularly right now, that antique sideboard, dresser, table, desk, whatever it is, that is probably the cheapest that it's been in the last 30 years.
Yeah.
So if you want to buy that and you pay like a couple of $1,000 for it, there would be a fair chance that if you held on to that, got use out of it for 10 years, you may get most of your money back, all your money back. You could even double your money in 10 years. But if you went and bought a new piece of furniture, there is no way you're going to get all your money back in 10 years.
It's good. I sell drop shipping websites, and somebody had one for 12 months, destroyed it, and then sold it for more than I actually sold it to them for. And then the company that
Yep.
bought it come back to me, asked me if I'd train up their staff member how to work it. And I always thought, I never thought of selling assets, and that's probably a fair thing in your trade, is you are actually selling something that keeps its value, if not increases.
Well, that is one of the things. Like, we do have bubbles which which things go through. You can't see it very well, but there's a piece of china up there. That there is Royal Albert Senorita, which like Royal Albert's a good maker. Senorita's quite a hard patent to run into. The first Royal Albert Senorita trio that I ever had, I sold for $30. The next one I sold for $300.
Wow, just like that.
Same trio. Like, no difference. If you wanted to sell one now, I think I haven't sold one for a while, but I think they're about 160 to 200 now. So their price has gone up and down quite a bit. And there's another trio just behind my shoulder there, which is an Ainsley Bailey Cabbage Rose trio. If you wanted to buy one of those right now, you're looking at about $600 to $700. When I started, you could have bought one of those for about $90 to $150. But they have been higher than that. They have been up to about $1,200 to $1,400.
That raises another question for Danny Brain, is how often do you get the same thing in to sell?
Yeah, well, the guy that got me into antiques, the one that I went to school with, that I used to hang around with way back in the day, he said the problem in this game, and he pointed to a shop across the road. And I can remember this because this was one of these brilliant comments that you know where you were when this comment was made. He said, see that guy over there, Rob? He said, that guy's a bike seller. He said, if he sells 10 10-speed bikes today, he can make one phone call and he gets 10 10-speed bikes come back into his shop tomorrow. He said, if I sell the most expensive items in the shop, the 5 most expensive items in the shop, he said, I could be waiting the next 5 years to replace them.
Yeah, that's quite cool. How do you tell somebody who's asking too much money for something that you don't want to buy it?
Okay, right. So let's be completely honest here. If
Is this part of the pitch?
if you meet the person and you just sense that their expectations are way too high and that they're not a person who, how can I put it? They're not a person who's open to negotiation.
Yep.
Then you'll just say, okay, thanks for letting me know. I've enjoyed having a look at it. And I'll have a think. Right. You walk out because you just know, like, get your smiles away. But if I think that the person does want to sell it there, and they don't really know what it's worth and they're just trying to test the market or whatever, or to get an inkling, I will usually say, like, for example, if they had an item and they, I might say casually, how much are you going to get for it? And if they said $500 and I'm thinking this is worth $80, I will say, okay, I don't think you're looking at this right. So I will give you some information on it. And I would say something like, I think I will sell that for about 150, maybe 180. I would pay $80 for it. That's my comfort zone. So your decision is not whether or not some other dealer is going to walk in and pay you $500. Your decision is whether you take $80 today because I'm not coming back, or you own it for the next 10 years.
Yeah.
Like because crypto, well, that generally is the choice, but people don't know because, before I got into the game, I had no idea of prices. And sometimes, even now, you can run into an item that you haven't had before, but you think, I'm pretty sure I know where that fits in the scheme of things.
Mm.
And you can be completely wrong. You can be completely wrong both ways. Way too low, way too high. Like you take that vase there.
Yep.
Now that vase, not that you can see the whole vase, but that vase is hand painted by Royal Dalton. I can't remember the name of the artist now, but I sold that for about $300.
Mm-hmm.
At one stage, I would have got $800 to $1,000 for that.
Mm.
And I think when I sold it because I thought that's where the market for most things like that are.
Mm.
But when I sold it to a collector that I know quite well, he said, I would have paid quite a bit more for that.
Because some of the things I've seen that you've got actually look really nice, and I think people would buy it on look rather than age. Like even the one just to the on your left ear, the plate next to the truck. I quite like the
Oh,
depth
yep.
of that, and that would be a nice showpiece. I mean, you probably kill me if I said this, but having it in the entranceway and putting your car keys in it as you come into the door. I've
Yeah.
got one of those plates, but it would be a nice sort of thing to put your keys in, but reality is you'd scratch it and you go, what the heck are you doing with that plate? I'll buy that off you and you can keep your car keys somewhere else, right?
There is a school of thought that you should actually use antiques. They were made to use, and you are respecting the item by using it. That particular plate, if you're referring to that one there,
Yep.
is Royal Dalton pansy pattern. So that's actually hand painted. And when you have a look at most, actually, there's a few things in that image that are hand painted. But generally speaking, a lot of Royal Dalton is not hand painted, but pansy pattern is. And it was hand painted by the apprentices who started working for Royal Dalton, who fancied themselves as artists. And that's apparently the pattern that they used to train on. So when you have a look at it, you'll see that there's no rhyme or reason to how the color of the pansies is distributed. Like it's not blue, yellow, gray, red, blue, yellow, gray, red, or anything like that. You've got like 4 or maybe 3.5 reds, quite a few, like it's all random. Because that was like a practice pattern, the story was, and I don't know whether this is true because you hear a lot of things in antiques that get passed on, but apparently, the apprentices did it. Royal Dalton management didn't think it was good enough to sell domestically, so they exported it to New Zealand, Australia, Canada, and maybe South Africa.
Wow.
Not so much now because the prices really collapsed for pansy pattern, but a while ago, just a simple plate like that would have been about $250, and if you got a rare piece of pansy, up to $10,000.
Wow.
So, and this is where you said a really good thing. You said there are some things that you see and you like, and you would buy them because you like the look of them.
Yeah.
And that's kind of where we are today, that people are buying things that they like the look of because they haven't heard of Royal Albert. They haven't heard of Royal Dalton or Tudrick or anything like that. So who made it? They don't really care. It's like if you took all of the badges off of cars and people actually had to sit in a car, look over a car and take it for a test drive.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people may hop in a Ferrari and go, well, it's far too low to the ground, really uncomfortable, and I won't fit because I'm too tall, Whereas if you stuck the badge on and they knew the history and how much it was worth, they go, oh my God, it's a Ferrari.
Yeah, that's right. The other one I look at too is art, and I can see artwork and appreciate the artist by what he's done with the brush, or because there's technical art, like the people who do the sketches. I mean, it's always amazing, but the reality of it is, whether it's valuable, the history of the artist, whether he got his art sold worldwide. I remember painting a lady's house. Her name was Mrs. Adam, and the Adams family. Then where they had this amazing 11-bedroom house that had to be restored because the historical trust people were going to take her house off her if she didn't restore it. So we spent 3 months painting her house, It took about 2.5 months before we could actually get into the house to have a look through because we're painting the outside. Anyway, when I went in there, she had all the artwork, those big frames, the wire, and she said, she shared something with us what I thought was quite interesting. She said, when they bought the house, because it was it would be 150 years old, one of the oldest houses in Canterbury. She said that we bought the entire art of the one artist, his whole collection.
Oh, wow.
So because of that, they couldn't figure out the value of the artwork.
Because it hasn't arrived on the market.
Yeah, but the artwork was amazing, and this lady, which was, I don't know, must have been 90, who drove around in a Bentley, who told us that she made mistakes in her life, like she married for love instead of money, which leads into my next question. What's your biggest regret in your industry?
Oh, man. Okay, so I think I could have done other things with my last 20 odd years, put it that way. So I have been saying for ages, I want to get out of this game. And it's like anything. There's things about this industry that I like. So I'm self-employed. I can work my own hours. I'm my own boss. Every now and again, there's a kind of a gambling aspect to it as well, because if I have ads in, or if I walk into an auction rooms, I kind of have this methodical way of walking around the auction so that I don't go in there and go like that and have a look at the whole auction. I just walk down one aisle and then another aisle, because I want to surprise myself if I happen to run into something really unusual. And if a person rings me up from an advert for me to arrive around to give them an appraisal, and I say, what have you got there? The moment I hear one thing, one name that could be okay, I say, okay, that's fine. And I take their information and we arrange a time, because I don't want to hear all the rest. I want to walk in there and hopefully there's a surprise. So that's the gambling, the unknown, the suspense, the interest part. But several times I've wanted to get out, and I'll just tell you this little story. I went on a holiday to America in 2006, and I went over there for a month. And before I went over, I sold everything. I sold every piece of stock, everything, like everything that I'd bought, anything to do with antiques, gone. And a few friends who are also dealers were quite surprised, like they came around like scavengers and bought everything really cheap that, like I still had. Which is good because it was all gone. It was clean. So I went over there, had an amazing holiday, come back. And I was back for about 3 or 4 days, and I was actually bored because I didn't have anything to do. I hadn't really decided what I was going to do because I went on a holiday and had a holiday. I didn't go on a holiday and have a think. I just went on a holiday and had a holiday. So I knew it was a particular day, which right now I can't think which day of the week it was, maybe a Tuesday. And I thought, I'll just go and have a look at an auction because I'll be able to see some friends and stuff. So I walked in this auction, had a look around. It was a pile of crap. And I was happy. I'd been there. I'd got out of the house and I was walking out the door, and a client walked in and he said something like, "Is there much here for you?" And I said, "No, there's absolutely nothing." And I said, "That's great because I'm out of the game now." He said, "Oh, but what about the antique auction next door?" And I didn't actually realize that they had an antique auction through the other door, which was a completely different auction. I walked in there, and there was one of the rarest English China tea sets I had ever seen at that time. Well, actually, to this day, it would still be the rarest one I've ever seen. I thought, oh, no, I'm going to have to buy that. So I left a phone bid, even though it was literally only 2 miles up the road, because I didn't want anybody to see me bid on it. Because they all knew that I specialize in China, and I thought if anybody sees me, the price will go up. And so I left a phone bid, and I went to the auction, but about 20 lots before it came up, I walked out the door and had my phone there. And I'm waiting, and the phone doesn't go. And I'm starting to get paranoid that they've actually forgotten to ring me and they've just sold it or something. So I go to walk in and the phone rings and it's this item about to be auctioned. So I turned and walked straight out the door. And I was probably prepared to pay about $3,000-$4,000 for it. And I got it for $550.
Wow.
The worst thing that ever happened. Literally, probably the worst thing that happened in my life. I sold that on eBay for about $9,000, and it kept me in the game. And honestly, if I hadn't seen that one Susie Cooper dinner set, I don't think I'd be an antique dealer.
No. I got a question, but I'm going to change it for another question because I can answer this question for you. When did you get into antiques? And that was 22 years ago, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Have you ever broken an antique when on the job?
Oh, well, have I? I tell you, to be honest, I think I've only broken maybe 3 or 4 pieces the whole time. If you specialize in China, you're very careful. You are very careful. It is actually quite hard to break a piece of china. It's a lot harder than you think it would be. Obviously, a lot of pieces of china get broken over the years. But one of the, I'm not too sure if I should tell the story, but I will.
Yeah. You glued it back together, didn't you?
No. I bought a piece that I shouldn't have bought, and I paid too much for it. And I put it on eBay, and I put it on at $1 no reserve. And I forced myself to wake up in the middle of the night because eBay auctions, I don't know if they're the same now, but back then, I think you could withdraw an item as long as it was 12 hours prior to the finish of the auction.
Right.
And I was in Dunedin, miles away, at an antique auction, woke myself up in the middle of the night. Of course, back then there were no smartphones or anything. So you had to get on the computer in the lobby in the middle of the night. And so I ran down in my undies because I didn't think anybody would be up. It was 2 o'clock in the morning. And this whole group of people walked past, and I'm sitting there in my undies on trying to type. And you had to put coins into the computer to get it to go. It was nuts, and it was so slow. It was dial up and stuff. Anyway, I think I'd paid about $300 for it. And at that time, it was going for like $87 or something. And I thought I really should pull this off. And I didn't. I left it there, and I thought, no, it'll go up. It'll go up. Bear in mind, this is right when I started. So, and yeah, the auction ended, and I lost something like $200 on it. and I thought, oh, no. And then I got this crazy email from the buyer, and it was really abrupt and quite rude. And it was a person in San Diego, I think it was. And I didn't like it. I just didn't like it. So I wrote back and I said, I'm sorry, I can't complete the auction because I've just broken it.
Right.
And so what it was this big candlestick. It was a big pottery candlestick. And so a friend was at the market and he said, there's not many stalls out here and there's heaps of people. How about you come out here with half a van load of china? So I put the most expensive items that I could into the van, just, like for the hell of it. And I drove to Riccarton Market and I got it out. And there's heaps of people swarming around the china. And, because it's a market, they probably hadn't seen china that good there.
Yeah.
And this lady had a look at the candlestick. And just sometimes you put a crazy price on an item because you think you may negotiate it down, and the person will think it's more interesting because the price was high. So put $7.95 on the item.
Whoa.
And a lady comes along and she says, "How much is this candlestick?"
Mm.
And I said, $7.95. And she says, "I take it." And I just about collapsed. And oh my goodness, I couldn't believe that I was going to make almost an $800 sale. And
Yeah.
my friend that invited me there goes,
What?
he couldn't believe it because he knew, that I'd marked it, up to the sky. And so the crazy thing is that she said, "Have you got FPOS?" And I said, No, there's no FPOS here, but if you go down a few stalls, you can get some cash out. And she said, "No, not AP cash."
Oh, wow.
Oh, wow. This lady walks around with $800 cash in a wallet. So at any rate, she opens up her purse and hands me a $20 note. And by this time, there's about 20 people swarming around. And I said, "What's that?" And she said, $20 for the item. And I said, "That's $795."
Oh, no.
He says, "Oh, no."
Oh, my God. What an
She thought it
insult.
was $7.95.
Oh, my God. Oh, that's shocking. That's a great one. Oh, my God. Oh. All right. Next
Yeah.
question. That's funny. That one is.
Actually,
yeah.
the end of that story
Yeah.
is I wrapped everything up and I forgot to take everything out of the van. And a few days later, I go to the same auction where I bought it from, and I left an absentee bid for a spirit kettle. And if anybody knows what a spirit kettle is, it's got the underbase thing where you light it, and then the kettle, and then the lid. So at any rate, I go into the auction, have a look around, grab the spirit kettle, paid like 25, $30, whatever it was. And I put it in the van and I reached the spirit kettle over the candlestick to lay, and the lid comes off it. And it was almost like slow motion. This
Yeah.
lid goes down, down, down. I'm going, no. It lands on the candlestick and breaks the candlestick.
Finishes it off.
Breaks the candlestick. And the first thing that entered my head, because this lady, and I can still remember her name, but I'm not going to say it on here, but her first name was Arlene. Arlene had wanted evidence that I'd broken the candlestick when I'd said that I'd broken it and blah, blah, blah. And the first thing that popped in my head is I can now show her photos. So I took photos of the candlestick and I sent Arlene an email back and I said, "Hi, Arlene. I am really disappointed that you did not trust me. Here are the photos of the broken candlestick."
Boom. That is a good story. I like that. I do like that. Right, carry on with the questions. Let's go through quick fire some of them. What's the first thing you ever sold?
Cool. I don't know if it's the first thing that I ever sold, but I did buy a really hideously ugly vase in a garage sale for $1. Couldn't sell it out of the market for like 15, stuck it in an auction and got $200 for it.
Boom. The next question will come in quite nicely. How do you determine the value of an antique? I think you've answered this a wee bit before, but if you were the value?
I think value, it's tied to how long you want to own it. So if it doesn't matter how long you want to own it, you can probably stick any price you want. And sometimes when you walk into a shop and the price is really high, it's because the owner of that shop actually really likes the item and they're in no hurry to sell it, or they think it contributes to the look of the display of the shop or something. So sometimes what price tags are on an item isn't really what an item's worth, but generally you think, I want to price this to sell it in about 3 months.
So buy and sell in the same market like real estate would be a wise choice if you were trying to make a living out of this.
Yeah, generally speaking, the market goes down each year.
Right. Now, we have had about 10 people on average listening to us rave on. Has anyone got a chat room. No one's put a question or a comment in our chat room, which we're deeply offended about. So if you do have a question you'd like to ask Rob, here's your opportunity. But here's another one. What trends have you noticed in antique market over the years? I think you've mentioned a few of these already.
Yeah. The general trends is with furniture. When I first started, big, dark furniture was going for a lot of money. Anything Victorian, anything like that. Within a couple of years, that market had started to slide. And now, if you've got a big, dark piece of Victorian furniture, you will struggle to get rid of it full stop. And yet they used to go for a few $1,000s. Generally speaking, everything's been on a slide. It's only because antiques are now being competed with because people want basic, minimalist, simple things. So new products can compete with antiques. A lot of antiques are have got a lot of pattern or a lot of decoration sometimes, which can work if you've got a really good eye, but if you haven't, it's not necessarily going to work for you. The global financial crisis of 2008, 2009, whenever that was, that hit the antique market, and COVID kind of buoyed it up because everybody was at home, so they were buying, so prices actually went up, but now they've kind of crashed back down. The only thing in New Zealand that's gone up to defy the trend is Crown Lynn pottery, and I think a few other domestic wares in other countries have gone up and become more collectible as people buy their history or their childhood memories.
Yeah, that's true. Like the three ladies' heads or the three goose, or are they ducks?
3 flying ducks. Yep. Yeah. And anything. Yeah. And I guess for me, Tonka toys are Matchbox. You know, like whenever I see a Tonka toy and a Matchbox toy, I go, oh, gosh.
Do you remember the clutch
You know,
poppers?
ha-
Clutch popper. It was a
I've
car.
heard of that.
You rev it up, and then it goes, and then you click that
I
button and it takes off. I used to love that. I would die for one of those now.
I can remember what you're talking about. Yeah, and it's quite fascinating because the thing with a lot of those metal toys is that they're still around. If it's got plastic in it, it's probably not around. And so, yeah, a lot of those plastic things have got thrown out over the years. The tin toys ones have survived. A really interesting thing for anybody who grew up in New Zealand, Fun Ho was a local New Zealand toy maker that I had never heard of as a kid. And Fun Ho items can be really expensive. I think Fun Ho started in the 1940s and was probably in its heyday in the 50s, 60s, 70s. But growing up as a kid, I never heard of it. But now, if I run into Fun Ho toys, yep, I try to buy them whenever I can.
What was the steel ones? The toys that used to used to have a spanner and you tighten them up, and you could build bridges out of them. And I've got that.
Meccano?
Must have been, yeah. But we used to play with
Yep.
that when we were a kid, and I know that those toys would have been back in the 50s, if not 30s, 40s. I have no idea, to be honest. But also one other
Yep.
thing, I've got two questions here in the one. Some of those toys that we used to have with the wee soldiers, and they were made out of lead.
Yeah, they were Britons,
Yep.
I think.
So that would be
Yeah.
interesting. So kids
Yeah.
playing with
Yep.
lead. Yep. Now you had a thing the other day where a
Yes.
lady wanted a refund because she bought a lead crystal off you, and she was
Yeah.
worried about lead poisoning. So that was something that I learned, that lead goblets do have lead in them.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah, it's an interesting one, isn't it? Because crystal, my understanding, until that lady asked what I thought was quite an innocuous question after she'd bought something, or actually received the item, was, "Oh, this has got lead in. This is no good to me." And my automatic response was, "Well, it's crystal. All crystal's got lead in it." But actually, that's not true anymore. I'm not like. You get asked a lot of questions about crystal. One of the things is, can you tell crystal from glass? And it's to my eye is the way it reflects light. and I think crystal is kind of hardier than glass, and it's usually a lot heavier than glass if everything else is the same. But yeah, this lady wanted to return a decanter because it had lead in, because she was buying it for her husband. She loves her husband, and she didn't want to kill him. Basically.
Not like my ex-wife.
Yeah,
So yeah, so
so
technically
I
speaking,
read up about it, and but yeah. So just for anybody out there, if you ever buy a crystal decanter, how you're supposed to use them, and I didn't even know this. Don't leave your alcohol in the decanter. You pour it out of the wine into the decanter. You bring the decanter out for show, and pour it out of the decanter. And once everybody goes home, you pour it back in the bottle.
I didn't really know anything about lead and all that sort of stuff until I used to do target shooting. But then the old guys that I used to shoot with on the range, because we were handing lead bullets all the time, used to get lead tests. And they reckon that because you're a target shooter, the lead levels of your bloodstream went up, and they would go and get tests. I did it
Wow.
for about 10 years, and I thought, oh, I never got a test, but some people have lead poisoning. Next question. We've got a couple 5 to go. We've got how do you stay knowledgeable how do you keep up to speed with what you need to know about antiques? Like, you talk to other
It's
people, or
it's not a simple question, that actually, because the one thing that I don't want to do is, and why I've purposefully avoided books, is that I don't want to know a lot of history. When you do know a lot of history, or you know the story about any of the artists or designers or anything like that, and there's been some really famous ones over the years that have designed porcelain, pottery, furniture, whatever it is you want to know who they were. You want to know how popular they are, how desirable they are, and what prices they are. But the key thing for me is that history won't change, but prices in the market will. So for me to stay knowledgeable, you're going to learn new things as you go along. You turn up at an auction, the auctioneer might say something, another dealer might say something. You may see a back stamp or something that you've never seen before, and so it puts together a few pieces of the jigsaw. You may buy something and you go to list it, but before you list it online, you think, I just need to work out how old this is, or you've forgotten the name of the designer or whatever it is, and so you do a little bit of research on the fly. So you're always learning. You're definitely always learning. Making or losing money is the great teacher. If you lose money, you will not forget losing money.
You said something the other day which is quite interesting. You said ChatGPT come up with different answers every time you did a search for something. So obviously, it grabs its information from all over the internet, and it grabbed this bit of information, and you said, that's not right. I know the answer to this question. It went, oh, sorry. And it went out and grabbed another answer. And then you said, no, that's still not right. And then it went, oh, sorry. And then it found the right answer eventually. So ChatGPT, maybe not.
Yeah, I think of its conceptual things, I probably don't have the right vocabulary, but if it's anything big that you ask ChatGPT, it'll be fine. If you're asking anything about antiques, like if you asked when was the Sheraton revival period for furniture, it may come up with the right answer, because I'm assuming most people that have written something about that on their websites, which is probably where ChatGPT has trawled it from, is going to be generally consistent. But I just know that people like me can write websites, and we can write what we've learnt. We can make it up. I don't think anybody would lie on purpose. There would be no advantage in that. But you just know, out of the information I've learnt about antiques from people, I know that quite a big percentage of it has proven to be wrong. And so if those people were people, just normal people that with good intentions were writing websites, and ChatGPT has trawled websites to get the answer to a question, pretty good chance it's going to make a mistake. That right behind my ear there is a piece of Moorcroft. Moorcroft is the best pottery you can get. Well, yeah, probably the best pottery that you can get out of England. William Moorcroft started Moorcroft, and I think he started it in the 1890s, early 1900s. He worked for McIntyre before that. When I wanted to do a short speech on William Moorcroft and I asked ChatGPT, it came up with something that he was born in 1700 something and opened up his first pottery in like 1890. You think so? He opened it up when he was over 100 years old. Yeah, I thought, well, that's got to be wrong.
All right, misconceptions. What are some common misperceptions people have about antiques?
Probably that everything old is valuable.
Yeah,
If
cool.
it's the one thing that I say to people, because you got to educate some people and you got to be kind of lighthearted about it. And I try to be as down to earth as possible. And what I say is that sometimes you walk into a house and they go, "This is very old, isn't it?" And I just say, yes, if it's old and ugly, it's still ugly.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
So, yeah, there are some things, like if we were to go 200 years old, if you had a 200-year-old piece of furniture, it will be worth money because it's a piece of furniture and it's survived 200 years. And if it's a piece of like sterling silver and it's 200 years old, it'll probably be worth more than a piece of sterling silver 100 years old. But if it's a piece of pottery or porcelain and it's 200 years old and it's plain, it's probably got no value because it has no purpose. It's not anything that you can do anything with.
Cool. Have you ever had something that you would never, that you've purchased and then you thought, I couldn't part with it, and you've kept it? Or maybe a better question might be, have you ever kept something in stock knowing that will increase in value in 2 years' time or something like that?
I've been really tempted to do that, probably with Crown Lynn. I didn't used to like Crown Lynn, and Crown Lynn is generally like a lot of the collectible stuff is just plain white, and it can be hand potted or mass produced. It has steadily gone up. I've been tempted to sit on Crown Lynn, but and I kind of quite like it. I've got a shelving, shelves that are in my studio here, which I did have a display of Crown Lynn on, and I used that as the backdrop for my YouTube videos, and I quite liked it.
Yeah,
but then I got offered some really good money for one of the swans.
The white one on the top shelf on the left. I haven't seen it.
Yeah. So that went, and that unbalanced my display, and then all the rest went. So short answer is no.
A way to make money with your YouTube channel, I suppose, put your most valuable bit of antique sitting behind your shoulder and drop the subtle hint that you're an antique dealer, and all of a sudden, a comment come up.
Dong, 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 dong.
Yeah.
And a really fascinating call that I did last week, was it last week or the week before? Last week, is I went into a lady's house who had inherited her mum's house, and in the house, in the garage, there was an old car, and this old car was in parts. It was the project of her dad, her late dad. And that was an interesting scenario of where you're an antique dealer and you're thinking, I wonder what that car's worth.
Yeah.
But it's all in parts, so you could see the chassis with the wheels on, the radiator, like everything was there. Apparently everything was there. And you're thinking, how can I make money out of that? How could I make money out of that? And I couldn't think of how I could make money out of that. So I told her how, if she was my sister, here's what I would tell you to sell it. So it'll be interesting to know whether or not she did. You do want to help people as much as you can. If they've got items that they want to sell, to me, a lot of people say we don't care about the money, but generally I do. And I do for a reason, because I think, well, anybody can sell a thing, but it's a kind of an art to sell it for the most money. And she didn't say anything like that, but I have had other people in a similar situation who've said we don't care about the money. But actually, I think their dad would have, their dad would have put a lot of work into that, had probably restored a lot of those pieces. It would have cost them a lot of money. And I think when you give it exposure so that it can go for its right price, you're selling it to the person who will value it the most.
There's a good question coming up. How do you handle restoration or repairs of antiques? Now, I don't know if you actually
Do not touch them.
Right. Now, that's why I just did a search while you was talking there before, and I looked up the place that's called the Repair Shop. Have you seen that on TV?
Yeah.
And that's a different business in itself, though, isn't it? That's what I'm sort of coming up. And if you want to get old things and repair them, like the upcycling that a lot of people do of furniture, that's a form of art, creativity.
Yeah.
I see some of the things that they bring into that shop, and I'm going, look, it might even be in a leather pouch or a handbag or some teddy bear that had his arm pulled off and turned inside out, sewed back on as a leg instead of an arm. And they pull them all to bits and make them all look brand new again, and people go away with their memorabilia.
Yes, and I get people ring me up reasonably regularly, and they say, do you know anybody who usually restores glass? Occasionally I get asked. I have never met anybody who restores glass or crystal, but usually restoring something like a broken vase or plate or anything like that. And what I say to them is, if you want to restore it to sell it, don't bother, because it's still broken. It just looks better. If it's got some sentimental value and you want it restored, then yeah, absolutely. And there are people out there, they hide underground though. They're very, very hard to find. But when you have a look at restoring or repairing a piece of furniture is completely different to restoring a breakable piece of china. If you restore a breakable piece of china, it's basically still broken. And if you stick that in hot water, it will probably dissolve.
Yeah.
If you had a Scotch chest and you restore the cracks, the splits, repair the legs or the handles or the drawers or whatever, that's perfectly fine, perfectly acceptable. Sometimes it's even enhances the value because it's more useful. And so it does depend what we're talking about. But for me, because I specialize in China, won't go near anything broken or repaired.
Thank you. Now, I've got a bit of a story to tell. I had a lady come into the shop the other day, a young girl, quite attractive, I must say. And so she asked me all these questions. She was really cute. And I thought, I'll be the nice gentleman as I am and answer all the questions about it. And she said, it's just that I'm going away soon, and I wanted to have a look at a watch and see what it felt like on my wrists. I went to Noel Leemy's. They wouldn't let me try it on. I'm going, yep. And she said, and I want to buy it in duty free. But I just wanted to come here and try it on and pick my brains first. And I went, oh my God, I can't believe people do that. She wasn't that attractive when she left. but now I'm wondering how many people come and pick your brains, because with the question here is, how has the antique business changed with the rise of online marketplaces? Because people might think, oh, I'm going to sell it myself, because I come to Rob, ask him for his advice. get the advice I want, and then sneak away to Trade Me and list it on there or on eBay and get what I think I will get for it because Rob's given, have you ever had people come and pick your brains and then you've found that item on Trade Me later
Yeah.
on? Oh my God, I can't believe you did that.
Now, yeah,
Is
I view it I view it slightly differently, but yeah, I did used to. I know I didn't like it at the start, but that was a long time ago, and I soon changed my tack on that. So if anybody asks me a question, I usually come back and I'm brutally honest, and I say, just tell me what you would like to happen once I answer this.
right.
So, for example, sometimes they've had an item that's been stolen and they want to know how much to put a claim in for. Sometimes they want to sell an item and they want to know how much to sell it for or where to sell it, et cetera, et cetera. So, look, at the end of the day, I have a saying, I want to be pleased. I want everybody who rings me up to be glad that they did. So if I can help anybody, perfectly fine. And if it means that I don't make any money, that is no problem at all. I think they may remember Rob when they want to sell something one day or to buy something. So that's what I ask them. I try to work out, what really do you want to happen here? If it's insurance, I don't do them for free. But that's because the only person who wins is the insurance company, because the insurance company usually pay the amount of my appraisal. So it's a waste of time of me doing them for free, because the insurance company is out there to make money, which is fair enough, and so am I. But if a person says, hey, I've got an old teapot and I'd like to know how much it's worth, I usually say, do you want to know how much it's worth if you sell it to me or to a dealer? Or do you want to know how much it's worth if you stick it on Trade Me? And I used to not do stuff like that, but I've actually worked out over the years, most people can sell things themselves, but they can't be bothered. They don't want to deal with other people. They don't want to take the photos. They don't want to list it. They don't want to meet the other person or anything like that. Or they just don't have the time. So as long as we're all straight up, if anybody wants to sell anything online, they want to know how much to list it for, I'll tell them. And yeah.
The other one I was thinking of, just why that question came into my head, it's quite good to know you so well and know what you do, but sometimes you might see something that is a guaranteed sale, not necessarily for yourself, but you might actually walk into a house and go, look, if I buy this for Jimmy, I know Jimmy. Have you got a client list of people that will buy? If you ever come across this, Rob, I'll buy it. Just get it for me. On shipping list.
Yeah, I have heard that, and it goes in one ear out the other. I used to get quite excited by that. And I used to think, wow, if I ever run into any sterling silver, I've got an instant sale. If I ever run into any Moorcroft, I've got an instant sale. If I did have a person who bought Chudrick pewter, who would actually buy every piece of Chudrick pewter that I found. And he was over in the UK. He was a massive dealer over there. And he said, if you find it, I will buy it. And he used to pay me really good prices. So I didn't have to worry listing it or anything like that. I actually went to the UK and hand delivered him a piece of Chudrick pewter once. And I met him. That was back in about 2012. Wow. But generally, no, because I know where my market is. And I've found that sometimes there are things that I will sell direct to a person. Like right at the moment, I've got a person who buys a lot of Moorcroft. In the past, I've had a person who bought Samita ware and Iger ware and stuff like that. And there's not too many people around who buy those things. But generally speaking, I'm quite happy to put it online because it's quicker. I don't have to wait for a response. And once it's up and gone, it's gonna sell. Like all of my stuff is priced to sell. It's gonna sell. I don't really care who I sell it to,
It's quite good because going back to Rick Harrison, I know that there's another side of his business that he never talks about, and that is the people that buy his stuff. And I know when somebody comes with an old firearm, he knows his firearm, he gets the expert in. I know he's already, a lot of the time you can tell he's sold that before. He's actually, gone through that process. And that's another side of the business. What advice, second to last question, we're going to go back to the question about the scam for the last question. What advice would you give someone who's just starting out at collecting antiques? So I want to start building a bit of wealth. Maybe it's like people who say they want to have a bit of crypto. So now you've got somebody who comes to you and say, I want to start investing in antiques because I've got some disposable money. What sort of advice would you give somebody who said, look, I've got 50 grand sitting here and I want to go and start, buying some antiques because I don't want the banks to get my money. You know the person I mean? Those people.
Yeah, it is a hard one because prices do fluctuate quite a bit, and there have been things that have gone up, but I don't know that there's been any indicator that they were going to go up. They just went up. And some people used to say that, well, if you're buying all of things like House and Garden magazines, trend magazines, where you can have a look at how people are decorating houses and things like that, there could be an item or types of items that are coming up in those magazines that people read and like and then hunt out to buy them.
Was it like Art Deco a wee bit? Because I know there was a big thing on I used to like Art Deco houses. I don't know if it's still a thing, but Art Deco, I don't know, thingies.
For everything that goes up, there's probably another thing that goes down. So that would be one thing. I would probably tell them that you need to work out this is a tricky one. If I was having that conversation, I'd say, well, there's a couple of ways that you could approach it. If that's what you really want to do, I'd probably suggest that they didn't do that. I would probably suggest go and buy what you like so that you can enjoy looking at it, using it, and when you go to sell it in 1, 5, 10 years time or whatever it is, there would be a fair chance if you always buy quality. I'll tell you that. Yeah, you'll always buy quality. It's always quality something that goes up. You're never going to get crap going. But everything can fluctuate. But the key thing is people usually say, buy something quality and timeless, because that stuff is always in fashion and there's always someone around with enough money to buy it. That would be the general thing. And I know that's kind of
evergreen.
Yeah, it's like, I'm just having a look at my background in there. And I'm thinking I would probably be buying Tudrick, because I can't imagine that Tudrick could get any lower than it. Like a lot of these things. Right behind my head there is a floral pattern trio.
That looks awesome. Yeah, I haven't seen that one for the whole show. That looks really nice. That's the sort of stuff I'd buy because I like the color of it and the detail. It passes my type of brain. Yeah.
So that's Royal Winton. That's probably Julia pattern, chintz they call it, or all over floral. That used to be worth, I think, about $500 a trio when I started.
What's a trio? Is that like a saucer plate? Like a dinner set.
3 items: cup, saucer, plate.
Right.
Yeah. So now, if I had that now, I think I'd be selling it for $120, $150. So about a third or a quarter what it used to be worth. It's still the same thing. It still looks the same. So nothing's really changed, except there's less pressure in the market. That's the thing. There's less buyers out there. Therefore, the buyers that are there, because one of the things, once a person's bought something, if they collect it, they've got it. So that's one person out of the market,
I'm looking at your pictures in the background. I see a horse there, and I can only imagine how many times somebody's had that horse and the legs fallen off. Yep.
Well, I actually bought 2 of those, and I thought they were both fine, and then I realised that one of the legs had fallen off.
Oh, it's just yeah, and then you've got your frog on the other side there, which I find quite interesting.
Yeah.
He's in the seat, and it does. And the last sort of the question I'm going to ask you isn't the scam one just yet, but you did have one item once that you bought. We go to a speakers group, and one evening Rob brought a whole lot of antiques along and asked people if they could determine the value of them. It was a really interesting night, and we could do that one other video one night. But one item you did bring along was that Tin Man, and you said this was an item which is probably worth a lot of the gollywog. I shouldn't say gollywog, but it had a tin.
Oh, yeah. So that would have been a mechanical bank. That would
Yeah,
have
and you
been
can't sell that because they've been banned on the internet because of
Yeah.
so that'd be
Yes,
something
you
somebody might
used
go.
to.
Yeah, it used to be valuable, but because it's something that the internet won't allow you, you can't put it on any online platform to sell it without it being removed because it's like a gollywog sort of style thingy.
Yeah, that's a classic story, that one, because I think I paid about $100 for it because it was an old one. And very hard to get the old ones. And I kind of got sidetracked with a few other things outside my business. So it never got to be listed for a while. And then when it got listed, they had obviously changed their listing policy. So it got pulled. And it kind of sat here for ages. And I thought, well, what am I going to do with it? Like, if I can't put it online. So I had to put it into an auction. It went for $70. And then they took their cut out of that. So I probably lost $50 on it. So yeah, that's one of those things, though. Like, it's like anything that's culturally insensitive, any elephant ivory, can't sell it.
Yeah.
There's a few other things as well that don't come to mind. But take ivory as a classic example. Ivory used to be worth a lot of money. The older ivory is, hasn't, it's still legal to sell. It's just that online sites don't want it on there because I don't think it's a good look for them. And it may not be a good look for us people, us antique dealers selling it too, for all I know. But old ivory is old ivory, and it's not like selling old ivory is going to encourage a poacher to do something overseas that they shouldn't be doing. But it is what it is. So that's one of the tricky things, because I got offered a ivory notepad, which I'd never ever seen before, and it was thin cuts of ivory bound in sterling silver, turned into a notepad from 1723 or something, like 300 years old, something like that. It was 17 something. And and I thought, oh my God, that's one of the oldest items I've been offered. And I said to the guy, I just can't buy that. And he says, oh, I'd like, you know what it is? I said, I know exactly what it is. That's why I can't buy it. And so that was one of his most precious possessions that had been a family heirloom. But you're thinking, yeah, I can't touch it. And then
you go give it to a museum instead. Is that what you'd do, or is that would they not have it either?
Well, you can auction them. That's
Right.
about your only option now. You can still put that stuff into an auction. I can, having said that, I can remember it'd be a few years ago now, there was a collection of Nazi war memorabilia.
Don't mention the war. Yep.
Yeah, which came up, and there was a protest outside the auction rooms when we turned up.
Wow, how about that?
Yeah, like that had
Didn't you have a Nazi uniform a wee while ago?
I had a German one, not a Nazi one. Yeah, but to be perfectly honest, I wasn't exactly sure what the difference was. But no, Nazi is more. In fact, I won't try to explain that because I'm not too sure I know enough. But no, there were a lot of German uniforms, but Nazi uniforms were different. A lot of people viewed a Nazi uniform as, in fact, I don't even know that I can explain this online that it would actually make any sense and not mislead anybody. But there were a lot of German infantry.
Right.
And yes, they did have the swastika on it, and it's really weird when you get offered that. It's quite evocative, because you think, oh, that's kind of interesting because I can remember the war documentaries growing up, but then you actually, when you go to touch it, you think, ugh. Yeah,
It has a lot of bad stigma to it. Every time I think of Hitler and all, I think of lampshades that he had made out of human skin and all sorts of stuff like that. So I just have all these terrible thoughts around it. I'm going to change the very last question, and then we'll call it a day. How can you avoid being scammed in your industry, and is scams prevalent? Is there people getting scammed in the antique industry, and what were some tips you could give people from making sure they don't get scammed? Is it like that vase that somebody's trying to sell and then you realize it has been broken and they haven't told you that when you buy it, or something's
Yeah,
not as
you
old as
don't get
people
any
make out?
major. There's no there's no major scams as such that I know of. But having said that, if you're a collector or you're buying anything that how can I put this? Know what you're buying. And if you don't know what you're buying, and particularly if you're going to be paying a fair bit of money for it, ask somebody else what they think of it. Because there's a lot of fakes out there. There's a lot of replicas. There's a lot of things. I can remember going to an auction, an Asian antique auction years ago. And I thought, well, this would be a great opportunity for me to learn more, because this was a long time ago. This would have been at least 20 years ago. And so what I did, I went around everything that was in that auction, had the catalog, and I remember marking down replica or reproduction. So I put an R next to it. If it had anything wrong, I marked what it had wrong next to it. And if there was anything that I particularly liked, I circled it. But I decided I'm not going to buy anything. I don't know anything. I don't know enough about this part of the market. So I went in there. And what I was really surprised at is that the items that I knew weren't real. They were either reproductions or replicas. They, in this particular auction anyway, were going for as much as the real deal.
Right.
And I was surprised by that, because you kind of looked around the room and you thought there's a fair bit of knowledge in here. But, there probably was, generally speaking, but there was enough non-knowledge for those reproduction items to fetch more money than they should have. But then maybe those people knew they were reproductions. I don't know. I'm only surmising. But yeah, if you are paying good money, probably a good idea to buy the real deal. That's all I'd say. Make sure it's the real deal.
No, that's good stuff. There was something else I was going to say. Now, when you're at an auction, and people you're in a room of other people who are bidding against you, do you have a secret look when you look at somebody? Do you wave your hand, or do you give them a? What's your secret
I
look?
think one of the things is that if you've been a dealer for a while, and I guess I'm one of the veterans now, that you don't want anyone to piggyback off your knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel a little bit conspicuous if I walk into an auction now because, like a lot of people know who I am. They know what I buy and they know where I sell and they know what I'm prepared to pay. Well, they may not know what I'm prepared to pay, but if they watch me bid, they could just decide, well, I'm going to bid one more than whatever he does.
That's right.
Of course, that doesn't necessarily mean that you'll get it. There could be someone else who knows more than me. Or at least is prepared to pay a lot more than is my comfort zone. So I try to buy off the phone when I can. I don't turn up at an auction. It's just not worth my time. Now, an auction can take all your day and it's just not worth it. I've got other things that I would rather be doing. And if that means that I miss out on something, that's fine. And the other thing, my attitude's changed a little bit now as well, that I'm quite happy to miss out on something. Like I don't have to buy everything. Sometimes you can walk into an auction and you go, I like that, I like that, I like that. And I like it, but I don't need to own it. And if I do need to own it, then I'll leave a phone bid. But one tip that I'll give people, work out what you're going to pay before the bidding starts, because I think I'm pretty cool, calm, and collected. But sometimes there's an item that you really want, and you think, it's like a saying that we used to have at the start is, I don't know what that's worth, but I want to be the one to find out.
Yeah.
And what that basically meant, you walked into an auction, you saw something you hadn't seen before, you knew it had something or a series of somethings going for it that could mean that it was a flyer, particularly on eBay. And so you think, I don't know what that's worth, but I want to own it so that I can find out. And it was a bit of gamble there because you thought every now and again you're going to lose money. Sometimes you only get your money back, but every now and again you'll get a flyer.
Brilliant. Well, I think we're done, Rob. I think that was quite interesting. We've actually been speaking just short of 2 hours, so I don't want to go
Oh
over
my
2 hours.
goodness.
I know. You ask a man, we often are struggling for content, but when you're talking about something that you know or you've got experience in, a conversation certainly go on for quite a while. And I have thoroughly enjoyed having you on. I'm going to actually release this as a podcast as well. And I also will create a blog on dehek.com and put it in there. And obviously it'll be on YouTube. But I think that was a pretty good, what is it? Antique Dealer Confessions.
I have one other short story that I will tell you is that years ago, I used to hunt around all the garage sales. That's how I used to get a lot of my stock as well as the auctions. And the aim is get to a garage sale before anybody else. And if that means going the day before, or even 2 days before, you go a day or 2 days before. And you have to have a thick skin because some of the responses that you get when you say, I'm here for the garage sale, and they say, that's Saturday, and you're right there on a Thursday morning or something like that.
Plan.
And I used to say, hey, look, I'm a dealer. A lot of people don't like dealers, but if you let me in, I will tell you how much I would pay rather than me just paying the price on it. Because a lot of people would have low prices on a lot of things in garage sales because they got no idea what it's worth. So I'd make them an offer instead. So that was a win-win. But there was this one day that I'd got up early, planned all my garage sales, and you're driving around as fast as you could legally to get from one garage sale to the other, all right, in, out, fast as you can. If there's nothing there, you're straight back in the car and you're straight off to the next one. It was around about 9 o'clock, which is quite late on a Saturday morning to find anything unusual. And I went into a garage sale, which has been going since about 7. And there've been heaps of people there. And I was having a rummage around, and the lady said there were quite a few ladies that were running this garage sale. It was an estate. And one of the ladies said, are you looking for anything in particular? I said, no, just anything old. I specialize in China. Have you got anything like that? She said, no. Oh, there were some flying birds that we had in the house.
Uh-huh.
And I said, are they still there? And she said, oh, no, I sold them. And I think she said, are you a dealer? And I said, yes. And she said, we sold them for $80. Was that a good price? And I said, well, it depends what they are. And she said, well, how do you know what the good ones are? I said, well, if they were Beswick, then they were probably worth a lot more than $80. But if they weren't, then $80 was probably a fair price. And she said, is everything by Beswick worth a lot of money? I said, no, but the flying birds are. And so she reached into this box that I'd already looked in, and she pulled out a butterfly. It was a porcelain wall vase in the shape of a butterfly. And it looked like a piece of crap, which is why I'd seen it and left it there. And she said, oh, do you mean like this? And I said, well, that's not Beswick. And she said, oh, but it's got Beswick on it. I said, has it? So she turned it over, and sure enough, it was marked Beswick, which is a good maker of anything that's an animal or a bird or anything like that. But this didn't look like a nice piece at all. And she said, is that something that you'd buy? And I said, hey, look, yes, I'd buy it. I said, but I don't think it's worth very much. And I offered her $20, which I thought was pretty sporty, because I thought that might only be worth about $25 or something. Just so that you get the picture of how ugly this was. It was about the size of my hand, and it had a piece of wire. It had two pieces of wire coming out with a little knob on the end. That was the antenna. So it looked like something made in Japan. It looked like crap.
Yeah.
So at any rate, bought that, driving around the rest of the garage sales, and this little voice is going, how many Beswick butterflies have you seen, Rob? And I'm saying to the voice, I haven't seen a Beswick butterfly.
Yeah.
Now, do you know if you haven't seen a Beswick butterfly, then Beswick butterflies might be rare? Yes, I know that, Rob. So I got home and I Googled it, and I could not find a Beswick butterfly anywhere on Google. So I stuck it on eBay. I got $2,000 for it.
Oh my God. Yeah.
I got $2,000. I was absolutely shocked. A week later, another Beswick butterfly turns up in an auction. I could not believe it. I thought, I've gone all this time, I've never seen one. I sell one, then another one turns up, not exactly the same. I had to pay something like $300 for it.
Yeah. And they would have been
I'm
going,
thinking, well, I got $2,000 for the last one.
Yeah.
You know, so that was cheap. Threw that on eBay, got $450 for it.
Oh,
So after
really?
the expenses, I only made about $20 or $30.
Yeah.
And the guy who bought it said, oh, were you the guy who sold that other one for $2,000? I said, yes. He said, yeah, nobody knows why you got that much. He said,
That's all right.
yeah, because one had sold. That was a better condition one than the one I had, for like $550 or something, you know, like a week before that or whatever it was. Yeah, it was bizarre. But the interesting part is that I got interviewed for a newspaper, and they said, oh, have you had any interesting finds lately? And I told people about the butterfly and finding it in a garage sale. And the next time, the week after, I turned up at the auction rooms, and about 3 dealers had a go at me for letting the cat out of the bag. I said, what are you talking about? And they said, well, don't tell people to go around garage sales. Yeah, that's how we get all our stock. And you just went on, you know, like a national newspaper and told everybody, you know, they should get up early on Saturdays and go around garage sales. And I said, I'm pretty sure that's not a secret.
Yeah. Now, we used to love garage sales when we were younger. That's what we did. We just cruised around. My father on a Saturday morning, I think it was, we'd cruise all the garage sales and go off to Brighton Mall. That was the only shopping complex that was open on a Saturday. And then we'd come home with a whole lot of stuff we didn't need and have a whole garage full of stuff. You would have loved our garage. Come home with fishing rods, all sorts of stuff that you just think that you needed. Well, he did. He thought he needed at the time. Come home and the HQ Holden.
Oh, classic. It'd be all right if you had one of those now.
I know, it'd be an antique. Well, kind of 50 years, not even that. Good stuff, Rob. Well, thank you. That's gone over 2 hours now. You just told us a wee story that took another 5 minutes. You're just a legend. Talk antiques all day long, can you?
Probably.
All right, mate. I appreciate it. All right, we'll call it quits, and that's you can stay here. I'm just going to finish the live stream. We will publish this, as I said earlier on, as a podcast. You'll find it on my website as a blog, and it's been thoroughly enjoyable getting to know more about antiques once again.
Thank you.
The Rob Antique Show sort of thing. Not really, is it? No. All right. Thanks, Rob. Smile.
Okay. Bye.
There you go. It's all done.